Today's the 6th day of the January 1986 7-day retreat. I remembered after the talk was over that we'd only dealt with one part of the question. The question was whether it was possible not to be hurt again. The other part of the question was whether it was possible not to hurt others again, or hurt another. And that part we did not go into. Why is it that one doesn't want to hurt another person? Is it that one doesn't want to hurt another person because one is afraid that the person will not like one after that? And one depends on being liked. One's whole being needs to be constantly re-established and reaffirmed through other people's liking one. Is that the reason one is afraid of stepping on anybody's toe? Which makes for an enormously difficult and tension-ridden life, because one does want to tell somebody what one thinks about the person, or one wants to express anger, and at the same time the fear that if I express anger or express what I feel, I won't be liked. There will be some kind of a retaliation. So one acts but doesn't like how one acts, or one is afraid of how one has acted. There's conflict, tension, frustration, and fear. In this tremendous need of being liked, needing to be affirmed in the self that we have talked about for the last 5 talks. Or is it that one doesn't want to hurt somebody's feelings because one knows how it feels to be hurt? And one can put oneself into someone else's position. One has hurt this person before, particularly if one lives together closely, husband and wife, or companions, family, parents, children. And afterwards one feels bad, one feels sorry for the hurt one has inflicted. Not so much because the person won't like one, but because one sees that person hurt. And one feels it. One feels really bad about that person's hurt. We do feel bad when people suffer. And very often, apart from feeling sorry for the suffering people, we also don't want that feeling of seeing people suffer, because it hurts us too, and we don't like it. We'd rather see people happy so that we don't have to suffer with them or feel their hurt. So even though one does, there is this space to feel with another person how he or she feels after one has hurt them with a harsh word or a brisk action or whatever the occasion may have been. There's also concern for the tranquility of the self that doesn't want to be disturbed by seeing others hurt. Is it all right to look at that, or does one feel, why dig into all of this? Let's just forget about it. I feel it's absolutely necessary to look at our motives in relationship, to clear it up, to let there be this light of seeing, of understanding. Because when that is there, when there's understanding, it does have an influence, an impact on our actions. The question was, is it possible not to hurt someone again? I don't know if that's possible. There are so many ways in which we get hurt. Someone may come to one, express their anger over something, or their sadness about something, and want comfort, support, understanding. What if one sees that support, siding with this person? This is what we often want when we go to someone to express how we feel. We want the person to side with us. If not in words, but to feel the person's understanding of how we acted and how justified we are in feeling the way we do. What if one sees that this kind of support only continues and perpetuates? The very same thing that has brought about the anger and the sadness. This whole feeling of centeredness in the self, its ways, its wishes, its fears, its needs. Can one point out to that person the way that the self works and brings about these things? Actually, I've gone one step ahead already. What if one does not feel that support is the right thing? It's not just feeling it. It isn't the right thing. And the support, therefore, isn't forthcoming. It doesn't come. Because if one sees clearly, the self is not in action here, which depends on the person approving of one, liking one, telling others how supportive one is, how nice. At the moment of seeing clearly, that all is not in action, so support doesn't come. Because it's clearly giving a false thing, doing a false thing. And the person gets hurt. Can one live with that? Not if the self becomes active and doesn't want to live with the hurt of another person, particularly if one sees a causal connection between what one did and didn't do and the hurt in that person. Then one may, if the self is active, it will sort of smooth things over and say, well, I didn't quite mean it. And, we assume, because we so thoroughly dislike being hurt, we assume that it is a bad thing to be hurt or to hurt someone. And here I don't mean willingly hurt somebody so that he hurts. But at times it's inevitable that someone will hurt if he or she doesn't get what he or she wants of one. And it's impossible to give it, because that would be just doing the wrong thing. I wonder whether this is clear. Please, if this isn't clear, there are meetings in which one can bring this up, because all of this is very essential in the way we live together. That there be clarity and understanding, and not just our conditioned politeness or often hypocriticalness. For fear of being disliked, or for assuming that this will do this other person good, and one wants to do good. In talking this over with the person who brought it up, this person wondered whether it is right to tell someone right into the face how one feels about her or him. Seems so often it is said these days to be oneself, to express one's feelings honestly. Yet there was a doubt in her that this is really appropriate. To tell somebody straight on what one sees is wrong with her or wrong with him. Why would one do a thing like this? If it's an emotional outburst, a release, then that's why one does it. There's so much one can hold down, and then all of a sudden there's an explosion, and one finds release and the pleasure of this release, and expressing the anger and giving the person a piece of one's mind. But it's not all that we're talking about. There was really questioning whether it is right to deliberately tell somebody how one feels about this person. There's so much of this going on these days, so many varieties of encountering and counseling and being together. One may have read in magazines about how to live together and on what basis. And if we're not talking about the release of anger which bursts out uncontrolled, one can't control it or won't control it, and if we're not talking about that case, why would one want to tell somebody right straight, head on, what one feels about him or her? Is it partly because one has read that this is the way to relate intimately, deeply, honestly? That may be one factor. Another one may be that maybe one thinks that one may change this person. In this way, this person, I don't know whether one thinks this all through. Usually we don't think these things through very far. We go a little ways and then we stop. It's too arduous just to think something through. But right now here, we can do it. It's the beauty of a retreat in which there's no pressure of time, there's some energy and a lot of space and silence in which to examine some of these vital things in which human beings relate or don't relate to each other. So does one think that if I tell her this, maybe she'll change? And there is a real desire to have that person change, to be a better companion, easier to live with. More conforming to the ideal image one has of one's living partner, husband, wife. Which may also be at the bottom of this angry outburst, angry at the fact that the person is not the way one wants him or her to be. And that's all one remembers from one's own past. One was yelled at or admonished, told, be this way, don't be that way. Or be that way, don't be this way. Actually, as a parent, one doesn't quite have the same compunctions to tell one's child straight in the face what one thinks or what he's done wrong, how he should behave. It sort of goes under the whole category of parental responsibility. One doesn't have the same hesitation maybe as with someone one works with or one lives with. This is why we've all been so incredibly hurt as children. All of us. By our well-meaning parents. And we become these well-meaning parents who repeat the same thing. Constantly telling their child, don't do this, don't do that, be like this or like that. And so often, when a child comes back, a parent will say, entrusted, what is the word? I don't have it. Will say, don't you tell me what to do. Shocked almost. It's not always there. There are parents who will listen when their children have something to say to them, but usually if there's this ingrained image of a parent and a child, one doesn't want a child to tell one. Looking at oneself being told something directly, how one is and how one shouldn't be. How does one respond to that? We don't want to be told that. We instinctively defend ourselves when we're told that what we did isn't wrong, isn't right, should have been different, that we're not fulfilling what we're expected to fulfill. We don't like to live up to expectation expressed in a verbal attack. We feel it as attack. The other person may not feel he's attacking us, but we feel attacked nonetheless. And if we feel attacked, we can't see. It's impossible to see when one feels attacked. When one is attacked, one defends. Not only one defends, but one tries to prove that this is the way one is. One clings all the more to one's position. It may not be so for a lot of people who are working on themselves, but I'm talking about it nonetheless, because these are the things that are brought up in meetings and have been brought up as far back as I can remember. So even if there's a well-meaning desire to change this person, to help him get better or help her relate better, it may totally misfire. May not work at all. Not only not work, but bring about the opposite effect of a entrenchment in one's behavior, in one's ways. We talked about it in an earlier talk. One has given in so much as a little child. Maybe now one can maintain one's position, unless one is afraid of the husband or the wife. There's physical abuse or so. So coming back to this question whether it is right at all to tell somebody what one feels about him, her, what he's doing, what he's saying, how he's treating one. It all depends, doesn't it, on the whole atmosphere in which one gets together. And one can question whether this telling is necessary at all. This assumes that a person can only see how he is if he is told, or if she's told. That there's no other way that a person can find out unless I tell him. And that's how we've been raised. We always assume that we have to be told, and that's why children learn to tune out the parents. They become avid readers. I know one family who a constant barrage coming at this boy, and at the same time they were proud of what an avid reader he was. The mother told me, he will hear nothing when he reads. He's totally absorbed in the book, in the subject matter. And as adults, as we live together, one can have meetings and talk about things and talk about it, mention things among each other, and yet one may find that certain behaviors don't change, depending on how these meetings really go, or depending on whether it's really effective to tell somebody, whether this is what changes us. We have to question that. By observing what happens with the so-called others and what happens with oneself. And to observe that change indeed can take place, but when it does take place, it's never under pressure, never under threat, never under accusation. That just brings behavior modification, which may be all we would go for. But that's a modified behavior in two people living together still does not mean that the two people are related. Related meaning lovingly. And lovingly not meaning romantically or sentimentally, but seeing each one and oneself as one is from moment to moment, without the immediate desire and demand that the other change. No matter what he does or she does. I think it is only in an atmosphere of this. It's not a loving acceptance, because acceptance means there is an acceptor who has decided to accept all of this. That's the self in a new guise as the loving acceptor. It's when there's no self, wanting, demanding, fearing. What is this relationship coming to? It is in this atmosphere of just being there and listening. Not sort of the studious, interested listening of a therapist. Yes, tell me more. With which I'm not knocking therapy. But one can assume that role too. And has heard so much about listening, so one will try this one too. See if it works. This relationship I'm talking about is not trying to see if it works. It is the right way of being, in which a human being can change. When there's no image of what one should be like or what the other one wants one to be like, in which there is no image, but therefore the clarity of insight. One can hear what one just said, and how cruel it was, how unfeeling, how self-centered. One can hear that when the other is not attacking, or setting one right, or demanding an apology or a change, then everything is given to see. Namely, that nothing is given. Can we see that? Does that make sense? One person brought up living with almost constant dissatisfaction. At times a little less achy, and at other times almost intolerable discontent, dissatisfaction. Asking about whether there was an about what one was dissatisfied. She couldn't pinpoint it. But she said, when it gets to this intolerable stage, I may call up a friend or some friends and go there, because it feels what I need is attention. And I do have good friends, and the attention that I get ameliorates, assuages this feeling of dissatisfaction. I feel better. But it was brought up in the meeting because it was seen not to be a solution, or not even getting at this core of discontent, which is not a unique thing with a human being. I think all of us know that, have lived with it or are living with it. And the way our society, that we ourselves have, and our forefathers and mothers have created, our society offers ways to ameliorate discontent. Not every society. Societies in which there is nothing to distract a starving person. Or a poor person who has to work every day of the week, 365 days a year, where holidays don't exist for poor people. I wonder if a person who works from an early age on, because children already work, women bear children, 5, 6, 10 of them, and work as soon as they can, because the growing little girls take care of the new babies. I've seen pictures people have taken in India where a little girl will carry a baby that is hardly much bigger than herself, because the mother either has another one or is also working. But in this society, many Western societies, there are many offerings to take care of discontent, dissatisfaction. All kinds of entertainments and groups to which one can belong. Spiritual, psychological, is an ever-growing number to which one can bring the discontent and maybe find contentment, I don't know. Sometimes it works for a while and then the discontent rears up again. And then maybe one will change jobs. A new job looms as more interesting, more involving, more attractive, more suited to one's needs or talents. And that can be tried and maybe it works. Maybe one really has found what one needs to hold discontent in abeyance. It doesn't come up. Or raising a family, really being into it. It may take care of the discontent. It's certainly a big job all around to have children. If one takes it seriously, it is a full-time job. And there's no time for discontent. And that has sort of resolved itself. Again, one must ask whether, when there is discontent, we are more or less obliged to take care of it, to satisfy it. We seem to assume that's what we need to do, that's what the discontent demands, and this is what we learn. Do this, try that. There's things are being offered and things are suggested to us to try. Courses, sports. There's no end to the possibility of involving oneself to forget about the discontent, to become a contented person. I don't think anywhere is there any thought given to whether to probe this discontent in itself, without trying to do something for it or against it. To plunge into it, to explore it, to live it, to feel it, to question it, without the aim of getting rid of it, but allowing it to be a fuel to the questioning. I hope this won't be misunderstood that I'm saying no more movies. Or I'm not saying any of this. It's up to each one, what each one wants to do. I'm just wondering whether this is not something that this discontent is beckoning to be questioned, to be looked at, not to immediately run away from or felt ill about. It's entirely up to each one of us. To observe with a mind that is not prejudging, preconceived ideas of what is the right thing to do, but to be open and always questioning. I say always questioning. There are times in which there's no need to question, when there's nothing there. And I don't mean that one has dulled oneself or drugged oneself with either taking things, inhaling things, or some spiritual practice which can be drugging. But when there is an openness with no sense of self, always come back to that, then whatever is there, reveals itself for what it is, and may not bring up any questions. Question may not arise. And yet, one can ask at such a moment, is there someone who's enjoying this state? Wants to hold on to it? Wants to keep it? And then one looks. Because one can't answer it immediately, one has to look. To be open to what's going on in the mind. And if there are images, to see them and let them be dispelled in the seeing. I want to come back to this discontent, when there's really a deep, aching discontent, dissatisfaction with oneself, with one's work here. It's getting no place. With one's relationships with the whole world, the way it's going. A deep, abiding discontent, dissatisfaction. Why should one do anything about this? Which does not mean one can't go to a movie or be with a friend. I want to say that again. But why can't one, even at the movie, if one is attentive, the discontent is still there. If the brain doesn't use its innate mechanisms to tune something out, to repress, then the discontent is still there. Because as long as there is this feeling of living as a separate me, isolated, there has to be discontent. and fear. So what's wrong with being with this discontent without trying to fill it up or shoo it away, quiet it, be rid of it? It's the same thing as what we were talking about before in relationship. Why not be completely with it? Without looking to hook into attachments or to bring up the attachments in fantasy. Well, we were going to talk about attachments too, maybe tomorrow, because that was brought up. What is attachment? Being with this discontent without trying to draw energies from one's thought attachments, what one is looking forward to, or what was in the past that was so pleasurable. These thoughts give energy to the body, and that feels good, and the discontentment abates a little bit. But can one see that these are just all schemes and not the truth of facing what's there so completely that the mind does not link on, the brain does not link on to anything, because then one can't be with this discontent. So it has to empty itself of all of its attractive and frightful contents to be with this discontent. Can one do that? Is that possible? Not do it as a doer, but questioning, wondering about what this is. One has never really touched it. Touched the bottom of it. And every movement away is seen in this awareness and denied. It's not repressed. Denied means if one wants to do something, one doesn't do something else. One sees it's an escape, a distraction. Or if one yields to the temptation to escape, can one pay attention to what is going on then, and keep in touch with that discontent, not use this to smother that. Is one even interested in doing that? Is the matter that serious for one? Dying, as it were, to the pleasures of the mind and the fears of the mind, of memory. And questioning without knowing what the outcome of this questioning will be, or if there will be any outcome. Then there's no division, no conflict, no cut-upness. And there's just this. And what is it? We will end here for today.